Peter Lindstrom started building his cabin into the Montana hillside in April 1882, and when his neighbors saw that he was creating 4 separate rooms stacked like giant stairs up the slope instead of one normal cabin, they thought he'd completely lost his mind. Not just doing something unusual, actually lost his mind, because nobody built cabins in steps. You built one rectangular structure on level ground. You made it as simple and conventional as possible. You didn't carve multiple rooms into a hillside and stack them like stair steps, with each room sitting higher than the one below it. That was crazy. That was a waste of labor. That was asking for structural problems and heating nightmares. Peter Lindstrom just smiled quietly and kept building. Peter was 39 years old in 1882, a Swedish immigrant who'd come to Montana Territory in 1876. He'd worked in iron mines back in Sweden, where he'd learned something that most surface-dwelling homesteaders never understood. Underground spaces and hillside excavations had unique thermal properties that could be exploited if you understood them. He'd spent 5 winters in a conventional Montana cabin, learning exactly how inadequate standard construction was for extreme cold. The cabin had been typical. 1 room, wood stove in the corner, minimal insulation, built on flat ground. During brutal cold snaps, the stove would roar constantly, and the cabin would still barely stay warm enough to survive. But Peter had noticed something during those winters. On the rare occasions when he'd gone into root cellars or partially underground spaces, those areas were noticeably more stable in temperature. They didn't get as hot in summer or as cold in winter. The earth itself acted as insulation and thermal mass. And Peter had noticed something else. Heat rises. Always. Inevitably. If you had multiple levels, the upper levels would naturally be warmer than the lower levels. In a conventional 2-story cabin, this was actually a problem. You'd freeze on the ground floor while the unused attic space got hot. But what if you designed specifically for that heat rise? What if you built multiple rooms up a hillside, each one higher than the last, and used the natural rise of heat to create increasingly warm spaces as you climbed? The hillside on Peter's property was perfect for testing this theory. It rose at about a 30-degree angle, steep enough to be dramatic, but not so steep that building was impossible. Peter's plan was ambitious. Excavate 4 separate rooms into the hillside, each one 8 feet higher than the previous one, connected by internal stairs, with the lowest room containing the stove, and each higher room benefiting from the rising heat. When he explained this plan to his neighbors, the reaction was immediate and harsh. "You're building 4 separate rooms in a hillside?" Erik Johansson, a fellow Swedish immigrant, stared at Peter like he'd announced plans to build on the moon. "Peter, that's insane. The structural issues alone. The lowest room will collapse under the weight of the 3 rooms above it. Each room is carved into the hillside separately. The weight is supported by the earth and the hillside itself, not by the room below. And heating. How do you heat 4 separate rooms? You'd need 4 stoves, 4 chimneys, 4 times the firewood. 1 stove in the lowest room. The heat rises naturally to each room above." Erik shook his head slowly. "Peter, heat doesn't work like that. Heat escapes. It doesn't magically flow upward through multiple rooms. You're going to freeze in the upper rooms while burning massive amounts of wood trying to heat the lower one. Heat rises because hot air is less dense than cold air. It's physics. If I create a path for that hot air to rise through connected rooms, it will naturally flow upward and heat each level. And the lowest room, where the stove is, that will be unbearably hot while the upper rooms freeze. The lowest room will be moderate because the heat is escaping upward to the other rooms. The system will naturally balance itself, each room progressively warmer as you climb." Erik looked at Peter with genuine concern. "You're gambling your survival on untested theory. What happens when winter comes and your crazy staircase cabin doesn't work? When you've spent all this labor building something that fails? Peter met his neighbor's eyes steadily. Then I'll have learned something valuable. But Eric, I don't think it will fail. I think it will work better than conventional cabins. Construction began in May 1882. And from the very first day of excavation, Peter faced not just skepticism, but active opposition from neighbors who feared he was making a catastrophic mistake. The work was brutal and unprecedented. Peter started at the base of the hillside, using a pickaxe and shovel to carve into the slope. He excavated roughly 12 feet wide, 16 feet deep into the hill, and 8 feet from floor to ceiling for the first room. This meant moving approximately 1,500 cubic feet of earth, tons of soil and rock that had to be dug, moved, and hauled away by hand. It took Peter 3 weeks of backbreaking labor just to complete the excavation for the first room. His hands developed blisters that burst and bled. His back ached constantly. He lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. Anna watched her husband work himself to exhaustion and grew increasingly worried. Peter, you're destroying your body for 1 room, and you're planning 3 more. This will take all summer and leave you too exhausted to prepare for winter. I'll finish in time. The work gets easier once I understand the soil. And if you don't finish, if you spend all summer digging and don't complete the structure before snow, then we live in whatever rooms are finished. Even 1 room built this way will be warmer than a conventional cabin. But Anna's fear wasn't just about completion time. It was about the increasing strangeness of the structure as it grew. After completing the first room excavation, Peter faced it with stone in the back and sides, carefully fitted fieldstone mortared with clay and sand. Then he built up the log front wall with a door and 2 windows. The first room, viewed alone, looked like a partially underground dwelling. Unusual, but not crazy. Then, Peter climbed 8 feet up the hillside and started excavating the second room. Same dimensions, 12 by 16 feet, 8 feet high. But this room's floor was level with the ceiling of the first room. And when Peter cut an opening in the floor of the second room and built internal stairs down to the first room, the design's strangeness became obvious. Neighbors who visited during construction were increasingly alarmed. Peter, the second room is going to collapse into the first room, warned Anders Nilsson, a carpenter with 20 years of building experience. You've cut a hole in the floor. You've weakened the structure. The weight of everything above will push through that opening. The opening is reinforced with heavy timbers, and the weight isn't supported by the room below. It's supported by the hillside itself. I've excavated into solid earth. Excavated earth isn't solid. It compresses, it shifts. You're trusting the hillside to support tons of weight, and hillsides move. This will collapse, Peter. Maybe not this year, but eventually. Anders walked around the excavation, examining the stone-faced walls and the way the second room sat above the first. His expression grew more troubled. And even if it doesn't collapse, how do you heat this? 2 rooms stacked vertically with an opening between them. Heat will escape through that opening. You'll heat the ceiling of the first room and accomplish nothing. Heat rises through the opening to the second room. That's the entire purpose. That's not how heat works. Heat radiates outward from a source. It doesn't flow up through holes like water. You're going to freeze in the second room while burning massive amounts of wood in the first. Peter tried to explain convection, hot air rising, natural heat stratification. Anders listened with growing frustration. Peter, I've built cabins for 2 decades. I know how heat moves. You're describing fantasy. Heat from a stove warms the air immediately around it. That warm air doesn't magically flow upward through multiple rooms. It disperses and is lost. In a conventional cabin, yes. But in a vertical structure with open connections and earth insulation, the heat has nowhere to go except upward. It will work. Anders shook his head and left, and Peter heard him telling others that Peter Lindström was going to kill his family with an unworkable design based on misunderstood physics. But Peter kept building. Through June and July, he excavated the third room 8 feet higher still, and the fourth room another 8 feet up. Each excavation took weeks. Each room required stone facing, log front walls, window installation. Each floor needed an opening cut and stairs built to the room below. By late July, the structure was taking its final bizarre shape, and a group of 6 neighbors came to stage what amounted to an intervention. They found Peter working on the fourth room excavation, shirtless and covered in dirt, swinging a pickaxe into the hillside. The 6 men stood in a semicircle at the base of the stepped rooms and waited for Peter to notice them. When he finally climbed down, exhausted, they didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Peter, we need to talk about this structure," Erik Johansson said, choosing his words carefully. "We're concerned. Not as critics, but as neighbors who care about your family's safety. I appreciate the concern. The structure is sound." "It doesn't look sound. It looks like mining excavations stacked on top of each other. 4 separate holes in a hillside with log fronts. This isn't architecture, Peter. We don't even have a word for what this is." Another neighbor, Olaf Bergman, spoke up. "The weight concerns alone are catastrophic. You have 4 rooms, each one loaded with the earth above it, all pressing down on the rooms below. The lowest room is supporting the weight of 3 rooms above it, plus tons of hillside. It will collapse. Each room is carved into the hillside separately. The earth supports itself. I'm not stacking rooms on top of each other like blocks. I'm creating spaces within the existing hillside structure." "And the connections between rooms?" Anders Nilsson had returned with the group. "You've cut holes in floors, built stairs, created openings. Each opening is a structural weakness. Each stair is a point of failure. Winter snow will load the hillside, spring melt will saturate the earth, and this entire structure will collapse room by room, starting from the top." Peter felt the weight of 6 experienced men telling him his life's work was doomed to fail. These weren't fools or mockers. They were skilled homesteaders genuinely concerned about a catastrophe. "I've reinforced every opening with triple-strength timber framing," Peter said quietly. "I've sloped the excavations to shed water. I've faced the earth contact surfaces with stone to prevent erosion. I've thought through the structural issues." "Have you thought through the heating issues?" Erik asked. "Because Anders says you're planning to heat all 4 rooms with 1 stove in the lowest room." "Peter, that's impossible. You cannot heat 4 separate spaces with 1 heat source located at the bottom. You'll freeze. Heat rises. The stove heat will naturally flow upward through the stair openings to each room above." The 6 men looked at each other with expressions that mixed pity and frustration. "Peter," Erik said gently, "heat doesn't rise like that. Not through multiple rooms. Not powerfully enough to heat spaces progressively farther from the source. You're going to discover in winter that only the lowest room is warm, and even that will be inadequate because the heat is bleeding upward through the holes you've cut. Then I'll install additional stoves, but I don't think I'll need to. The system will work. And if it doesn't, if winter comes and your children are freezing in a bizarre hillside structure that doesn't work, what then?" Peter looked at the 6 men and saw genuine care behind their opposition. They weren't trying to hurt him, they were trying to save him from disaster. "If it doesn't work, we'll seal off the upper rooms and use only the lowest room. We'll have at least 1 well-insulated space, better than many cabins. But gentlemen, I believe it will work. I believe it will work better than anything you've seen." The men left dissatisfied, and Peter knew they'd be talking all over the territory about the Swedes' doomed hillside folly. Anna found him sitting in the partially completed 4th room that evening, looking exhausted and discouraged. "I heard what the men said. They're frightened for us." "I know," and I can't prove them wrong until winter comes and the system works. Until then, I'm just a crazy man building stairs into a hillside. Are you certain it will work? Peter looked at his wife honestly. I'm confident based on principles I understand. But Anna, I've never seen this done before. I'm working from theory and observation, not proven examples. If I'm wrong, he couldn't finish. Then we adapt. But Peter, we're committed now. 4 rooms excavated, thousands of hours of work invested. We have to finish and hope you're right. Peter nodded and returned to work. He had 6 weeks until snow and 1 more room to complete. The structure was completed by late August. 4 rooms, each 12 by 16 feet, stacked up a 30-degree hillside like giant wooden and stone stairs. A single stove in the lowest room. Internal stairs connecting all levels. The front of each room built with logs and windows, the back and sides carved into the hillside and faced with stone. From a distance it looked like nothing anyone had seen before, a strange geometric structure that seemed to defy normal cabin architecture. Peter installed his wood stove in the lowest room, positioned in the back corner where it could radiate heat efficiently. He built the stovepipe to vent through the roof of the lowest room, not wanting to complicate the system by running it through all 4 levels. The first test came in early October when temperature dropped to 15 degrees overnight. Peter lit the stove in the lowest room at what he considered a moderate rate, not excessive, just a normal fire for a cool autumn evening. Then he and Anna waited to see what would happen. What happened exceeded even Peter's calculations. The lowest room, where the stove was located, warmed to about 55 degrees within an hour, comfortable but not hot. The heat from the stove was rising through the stair opening to the second room above. Peter climbed the internal stairs to check the second room. It was noticeably warmer than the first. He estimated about 65 degrees. The hot air from the stove below was naturally flowing upward and warming this space. He climbed to the third room, even warmer, approximately 70 degrees. The accumulated heat from both rooms below was rising and concentrating here, and the fourth room, at the very top of the staircase structure, was the warmest of all, somewhere around 75 degrees. All the rising heat from the 3 rooms below was accumulating in this highest space, creating a genuinely hot room. Peter stood in the 4th room in his shirt sleeves, looking out the window at the cold October night, and felt a surge of vindication. The system worked. Better than worked. It created 4 distinct temperature zones from a single heat source. Anna came up the stairs with their 2 children and stopped in amazement. "Peter, it's hot up here, actually hot. How is this possible?" "Physics. Heat rises. We have 4 rooms stacked vertically with open stair connections. Heat from the stove naturally flows upward, warming each level progressively more. The earth around the rooms holds that heat in. The system is working exactly as I calculated. The lowest room isn't cold. It's moderate, about 55 degrees. Comfortable for storage or daytime work. The second room is comfortable for living. The third room is warm, and this 4th room is genuinely hot. So we can choose our temperature by choosing our room." Exactly. In deep winter, we can sleep in the 3rd or 4th room where it's warmest. We can work in the 2nd room where it's moderate. We can store things in the 1st room where it's cooler. 4 different climate zones from 1 fire. The children were already running up and down the internal stairs, delighted by the novelty of a cabin with multiple levels connected like a staircase inside a hillside. But Peter still didn't tell his neighbors how well the system worked. He wanted to see it perform in extreme cold first. The extreme test came in January 1883, when temperature dropped to 34 below zero and stayed there for 5 consecutive days. Erik Johansson's conventional cabin, solid construction with a large stove, struggled to maintain 45 degrees despite burning wood constantly. Erik and his family wore heavy coats indoors. They stayed in the single room, huddled near the stove. They suffered through 5 days of relentless cold that made every moment uncomfortable. 3 miles away, Peter Lindstrom's stepped hillside cabin created 4 distinct climate zones from a single moderate fire. The progression was remarkable and exactly as Peter had predicted. First room, lowest, with stove, 52 degrees, cool but not cold, good for storage and brief tasks. Second room, 8 feet higher, 64 degrees, comfortably warm, perfect for daily living, meals, work. Third room, 16 feet higher than first, 73 degrees, genuinely warm, comfortable in light clothing. Fourth room, 24 feet higher than first, 78 degrees. Hot enough that the children played in light clothes, and Anna could do laundry without freezing. The temperature difference between the lowest and highest room was 26 degrees, all from a single stove burning at moderate rates. Each 8-foot elevation gain produced approximately 8 to 9 degrees of temperature increase. Peter's family could choose their comfort level by choosing their room. Want to cool down? Go to the first room. Want to be comfortably warm? Second or third room. Want genuine heat? Fourth room. The wood consumption was roughly the same as a conventional single-room cabin because Peter was only running one stove. But unlike a conventional cabin that struggled to heat a single space to marginal temperatures, Peter's step design created 4 usable spaces with a range of temperatures. On January 20th, the 4th day of brutal cold, Eric Johansson made the difficult journey through deep snow to check on his neighbors. When he reached Peter's bizarre stepped cabin and was invited inside, Eric experienced something that would change his understanding of building design forever. Peter walked him through all 4 rooms, climbing the internal stairs from the cool first room up through progressively warmer spaces to the genuinely hot 4th room. Eric could feel the temperature increasing with each level, not imagined, but dramatically real. In the 4th room, Eric stood in his shirt sleeves for the first time in 5 days. His face showed shock. "Peter, it's 75 degrees in here, I can feel it. My cabin is 45 degrees, despite burning twice as much wood as I'm seeing you burn. How is this possible?" Heat rises. The step design lets me capture and use that rising heat instead of losing it to an unused attic. Each room gets progressively warmer as you climb. The hillside excavation insulates everything. One stove creates 4 climate zones. 4 climate zones. Peter, do you understand what you've built? This isn't just a cabin. This is a solution to the fundamental problem of frontier heating. You've created multiple usable warm spaces from one heat source. It works because of the vertical arrangement and the hillside insulation. A conventional flat cabin can't do this. Eric sat down heavily on a bench in the 4th room, overwhelmed. "I called you mad. I told everyone your stepped cabin was the work of a man who'd lost his mind. Peter, I was completely wrong. You were being cautious. That's not wrong." "Yes, it is. I was defending conventional building because I couldn't imagine something better might exist. And now my family is suffering while yours is comfortable because you dared to try something everyone said was crazy." Peter showed Eric the temperature progression, walking him back down through the cooler rooms and explaining how the family used each space. Eric touched the walls in each room, felt the earth-backed insulation, understood the system. "Can you help me build something like this?" Eric asked. "I can't survive another winter in a conventional cabin, not when I know this is possible. Hillside construction is complex. You need the right slope, the right soil. But yes, if you have a suitable site, I'll help you." Word spread through the Montana Territory community like wildfire. The crazy Swede who'd built rooms like stairs up a hillside wasn't freezing. His four-room stepped cabin was creating temperature zones ranging from 52 to 78 degrees from a single stove, while conventional cabins struggled to stay above 45. People came from 40 miles away to see Peter's cabin and climb through the four stacked rooms, experiencing the temperature increase firsthand. Many were skeptical until they actually climbed the internal stairs and felt the progressive warming with their own bodies. Some people immediately wanted to build similar structures. Others remained doubtful. It seemed too complex, too unusual, too dependent on having the right hillside. But the mathematics were undeniable. Peter's cabin created 4 usable rooms with temperatures ranging across 26 degrees, all from one fire burning at moderate rates. A temperature difference of 15 degrees between levels on average, exactly as the title promised. The economic and comfort impact was profound. Peter could assign activities to rooms based on temperature needs: food storage in the cool first room, daily living in the moderate second room, sleeping in the warm third room, washing and hot work in the very warm fourth room. Not everyone who tried to replicate the design succeeded. Thomas Morrison built into a hillside, but didn't excavate deep enough. His rooms weren't properly insulated by earth and lost heat rapidly. Sarah Williams built her rooms too far apart vertically. The heat dissipated before reaching the upper rooms effectively, but most carefully executed hillside stepped cabins worked well. By 1886, 8 families in the area had built hillside step designs. All reported dramatic improvements in heating efficiency and comfort compared to conventional cabins. Peter Lindstrom lived in his stepped hillside cabin for 27 years, until 1909 when he was 66 years old. His children grew up experiencing something no other frontier families had: the ability to choose their temperature by choosing their room. The cabin was used by various families until 1934, when it was finally abandoned as families moved to modern houses in town. The structure slowly deteriorated, the log front walls rotting, the stonework crumbling. But photographs exist from the early 1900s showing the bizarre stepped structure built into a Montana hillside. 4 wooden room fronts arranged like giant stairs up a slope, each one 8 feet higher than the one below, creating a visual that still looks surreal more than a century later. Peter Lindstrom built rooms like stairs up a hillside when everyone said he was mad. They mocked the bizarre step design and predicted structural failure and heating disaster. They said he'd freeze in the upper rooms while burning massive amounts of wood in the lower one. Then winter came, and his 4-room cabin created temperature zones ranging from 52 to 78 degrees from one fire, while their conventional cabins struggled to reach 45 degrees, burning twice the wood. The stepped cabin was strange. It was unconventional. It required specific hillside conditions and complex construction. It was also dramatically more efficient than conventional cabins, creating multiple usable warm spaces from a single heat source by working with natural heat rise instead of fighting it. Peter Lindstrom understood something his neighbors didn't. Heat rises inevitably, and if you build vertically with connected spaces, you can capture and use that rise instead of losing it. He built 4 rooms like stairs up a hillside, and everyone mocked the bizarre design until they climbed those internal stairs and felt the temperature increase 15 degrees with each level. Then, the mockery turned to imitation, and the mad Swede became the teacher. And the stepped hillside cabin became proof that sometimes the craziest-looking solution is the one that actually works. The cabin is gone now, collapsed and reclaimed by the Montana hillside it was carved into. But the principle remains. Heat rises, and intelligent design captures that rise instead of wasting it. Peter Lindstrom knew that in 1882. It took one brutal winter for everyone else to learn it.